Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you to you and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to bridge two fields that I've worked in for a bit now. And today I would like to mention the chemical strategy for sustainability in context with the food contact materials. So I've worked on this strategy and supported DG Environment over the past 4 years in the discussions and developments, and including some of the staff working documents. But first, I would like to give a bit of a background, and thank you to Claudia also for setting this background very well. Why do we need it? Well, first of all, the citizens of Europe tend to be concerned about chemicals in their everyday life products, including food contact materials. 84% are concerned about this. We also have 90% of the citizens concerned about the environment. And this together with, of course, the observations of the environment under pressure has led to the European Green Deal. And as Claudia said, there's the zero pollution ambition for a toxic-free environment, which is where the chemical strategy sits. So what is this chemical strategy? Well, it has a couple of aims, mainly that we should, of course, continue to use chemicals, but in a way whereby we maximize the benefits, but minimize the harm to both planet and the people. And one of the ways to achieve that goal would be to go a little bit more upstream and think about how we design chemicals from the beginning to be safe and sustainable by design, not just the chemicals, but also the materials and products. And to make this not just the EU norm, but also the global norm. And this is what you see out here. The triangle is really showing how we would like to see a focus on the upstream prevention, rather than making things safe to begin with, rather than trying to prevent them from being emitted into the environment at the end, and into people, of course, into food. The chemical strategy consists of the strategy itself, and I've provided some links down here to the strategy itself, but also note there's an annex which has the actions and timelines. There's a mixture of staff working document, and there's also a PFAS staff working document, sometimes called the PFAS strategy. So let's take a look at what are the elements of this regulation, this strategy. First of all, that there's a focus on strengthened legislation. This is exactly to avoid harm to planet and the people. So what is mentioned in there is that we should ensure that the most harmful chemicals are not contained in consumer products, and food contact materials are mentioned as one of the examples. And this means that they should not contain carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic chemicals, endocrine disruptors, persistent and bioaccumulative compounds, but also chemicals that affect immune systems, the neurological system, and the respiratory systems, or chemicals that are toxic to specific organs. With the increased focus, there's also new hazard classes that will be added to the CLP, and that includes the endocrine disruptors, the PBTs and VPVBs, as well as persistent and mobile compounds. And these mobile compounds are those that are spread very easily in the environment and are very difficult to clean up afterwards. Next, there's the focus on the chemical mixtures that should be addressed across legislations, and a proposal for a mixture assessment factor. And what this means is that since chemicals can be toxic working together, that should be taken into account, but also that they can come from different sources. And currently under the food contact materials legislation, this is not considered. And so there will be some implication there. Next, there's a focus to boost the protection of children when you do the risk assessment, but also consider professional users and workers to more extent. And then what Ian was talking about earlier, we have the concept of essential uses mentioned many times, not just for PFAS, but across the chemicals. And this slide is almost not necessary because Claudia explained it very well. There's a focus on one substance, one assessment. So I will just jump to maybe mention that the REACH authorization and restriction processes will be reformed in 2022. And there's a focus to strengthen compliance, enforcement and market surveillance, which might also affect food contact materials. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at this boosting innovation. Well, again, it's not just, let's say, it's actually broader because it's for industrial innovation as a whole. But in order to make sure that the innovation is done in a safe way, there should also be a focus on testing and risk assessment methods that can support the claims of, let's say, that it's green and safe. Again, the chemicals play a critical role in the non-toxic material cycle, so this is also something that's on focus. And then we have the safe and sustainable by design, which was mentioned also at the beginning there. And this, I would like to give an illustration of what is this. So you don't have to read everything here, but the whole point about this is that to make something safe and sustainable by design, you need to consider many different things. First of all, you have to have an enabling environment, and that means that you have to have people who are educated to do the assessments. You need to have policies that work together, including financial policies, and you need to have support centers, so it's not just the big companies, but also the small and medium-sized enterprises that can get help. And then you need to have a whole process of how you assess if something is safe and sustainable. And here, I think what is interesting is that it's across the life cycle. That means it's not just only the use phase, but the whole life cycle, which matters. And that the chemical strategy has said that there should be some initial work on defining the acceptance criteria. So in order to achieve all of this, you also need to have a comprehensive knowledge base. And I think I highlighted here some points because there are going to be more requirements for information about polymers. Also, environmental footprint, I think, is very interesting because this is, again, not something which is done right now for food contact materials. And then I think of interest is also this tracking of substances of concern in products and materials. We already do this to some extent, but I would expect this to be more. And then, of course, to support this development, there needs to be some financing for the research and innovation agendas. And I think it's of particular interest is also this modeling in support of safe and sustainable by design has been part of the discussions. So to give a few examples, I've taken here a multi-layer material. And as you can see, it consists of many different layers. As you know, I mean, it could be a plastic with this one, but it could also have aluminum in it, or paper and printing on a coating on top. And basically, we need to consider all these different elements shown here. The distinction legislation means that we need to consider that which chemicals are put in there, which may also show up when it's recycled. So if you put something on the top here, it might not be of concern for food safety as the legislation is now. But then if you recycle the packaging material, you will then mix it into the material. And if it's not decontaminated, then it could pose a risk. So this is one of the considerations. So one of the thoughts is maybe there's a lot of discussion about, do you need to reduce complexity to achieve better recycling? And there's a whole discussion also about the repeated use versus the single-use plastics, of course. Then we have the polymers included under REACH. So this, I would expect that something will happen there. I don't know exactly how it will play out, but I would expect it. I mentioned the safe and sustainable by design. We also have these essential use principle that should be covering every product. So how will this play out? And then we have, of course, the workplace exposure, which I think would be relevant for the food contact materials as well, because there are many of the substances that are even carcinogenic. And this is one of the focus areas of not just, well, the European Green Deal in general. And finally, I think, of course, the knowledge generation across the supply chain, how will this happen? And the compliance and enforcement and development of methods would be interesting. And the last example I want to give is just that we have PFAS in food contact materials. Here I've shown two examples of a Teflon coated frying pan and also some paper and board, which might be well, paper material for microwave popcorns, which might be coated or seized with PFAS compounds. And here the point is that we need to consider it across the life cycle, and we have to think, how can this actually be reused? Is it possible to recycle this material, the metal, safely with the Teflon on it? And how is this done? Can we recover the Teflon or the more generally fluorinated polymers from the materials they're put in? And again, there are some workplace considerations because some of these compounds are, again, carcinogenic. And then for the PFAS, in the PFAS strategy, there's also focus on the grouping of chemicals, and Claudia mentioned this a little bit. But here again, there are considerations whether to group the chemicals as subgroups or as total PFAS. And this may be relevant both for drinking water, where we have actually the two different approaches, measuring both single compounds, but also total PFAS. And it's relevant for the enforcement and compliance of test methods. And finally, we have the restriction of PFAS coming out, which is expected to be ready in 2022. It's 5 European countries who have gone together and to make this restriction and propose it under REACH. And with that, I want to say that it's a very ambitious chemical strategy. There's a lot of work ahead, but we need input from all stakeholders to make it fly. And I think we really can congratulate DG Environment with this effort and everybody else who have contributed to it. And so with that, I want to say thank you for listening, and to DG Environment for this strategy, but also to Elena Montani for lending some of the slides and the discussions we have had both with DG Environment and with DG RTD, and with many of you experts who have also contributed along the way. Thank you.